So this is our second, as most of you know. The first one went pretty well. We're building on the theme of a spiritual toolkit. So hopefully the idea is that at these sessions you can get things and learn things and experience things that will help you in your day-to-day when life gets in the way. So tonight we have a wonderful human being that I've had the pleasure of meeting over the last several weeks as we prepare, Sister Eleanor Guerin, and I will let her come up and tell you a little more about herself. So.
All I can say is that you are truly brave souls to come out in the Yukon. But I just appreciate your enthusiasm to get out on a night like tonight. Well, here goes. What I was thinking about doing tonight is just doing a little contemplative exercise in the beginning. Be still and know that I am God. And then we're going to move into the song, Do Not Fear to Hope. And Kathy found this wonderful YouTube video that goes right with the song. So we're going to share that. And on your programs, you can see that there's an opening prayer, and we're all going to pray that together. And then Joanne is going to read from the prophet Isaiah. And I believe it might have been today's readings. And then Kathy's going to just read our little Advent reflection by Megan McKenna. And then after that, I'll do a little bit of a presentation. And it's all up to you. I figure probably about an hour and 15 minutes, but it all depends on how much time you want to spend doing whatever. There's a little bit of an opportunity to share in a small group, 2 or 3 people just getting together to share your insights. And the important thing is I want no one to feel pressured about anything. You know, sharing in the community, I believe, kind of builds up our faith and our strength for the journey. But I never want anybody to feel on the spot or that you have to share anything beyond what you want to share. And we're going to do that probably for like 5 or 10 minutes. So if you don't like it, it's not going to be that long. So anyway, welcome. And as I said, we're going to start out with a little bit of a contemplative experience. It's a little piece of a psalm. Be still and know that I am God. I'll say it, then you'll repeat it, and then I'll hit the gong, and we'll just wait for the sound of the gong to trail off. And then I'll say, be still and know that I am. And what are you going to say? Be still and know that I am. Then we'll hear the gong again. I'll say, be still and know, and you will say, be still and know. Gong. Be still, be still, be. And we'll just sit for just a couple of minutes of quiet. Because I don't know what your day was like, but I bet it was pretty busy. And I bet you're in need of a little downshift time. One of the sisters who was president of our community years ago, and she just died about 2 weeks ago, she said, you know, it's how do you downshift without stripping the gears? And that's what we're going to try to do tonight. Just slow down and allow the Advent season to overtake us. So let us begin. Be still and know that I am God.
Be still and know that I am God.
Be still and know that I am.
Be still and know that I am.
Be still and know.
Be still and know.
still.
Be
still.
Be.
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 My friends, let us pray. Gracious God,
We thank you for the season of Advent. Help us to use this time to open our hearts ever more deeply to your transforming love, so that we can live spirit-filled lives in a world that is filled with darkness. Show us how to bring light and hope into each of the people that we meet on our journey. We offer this prayer in the name of Jesus, by the power of the Spirit. Amen.
This is a reading from the book of the prophet Isaiah. And if you remember in Father's sermon, it's the first book, first prophet Isaiah. But a shoot shall sprout from the stump of Jesse, and from his roots a bud shall blossom. The Spirit of the Lord shall rest on him, a spirit of wisdom and understanding, a spirit of counsel and strength, a spirit of knowledge and of fear of the Lord. And his delight shall be the fear of the Lord. Not by appearance shall he judge, nor by hearsay shall he decide, but he shall judge the poor with justice, and decide fairly for the land's afflicted. He shall strike the ruthless with the rod of his mouth, and with the breath of his lips he shall slay the wicked. Justice shall be a band around his waist, and faithfulness a belt upon his hips. Then the wolf shall be guest of the lamb, and the leopard shall lie down with the young goat, and the calf and the lion shall browse together with a little child to guide them. The cow and the bear shall graze, together their young shall lie down. The lion shall eat hay like the ox. The baby shall play by the viper's den, and the child lay his hand on the adder's lair. They shall not harm or destroy on all my holy mountain. For the earth shall be filled with the knowledge of the Lord as the waters cover the sea.
Isaiah's vision of hope continues to expand. It is a sprout, a shoot from a stump, from an inauspicious beginnings, unnoticed yet strong and sure, powerful and transformative. This vision begins to take shape and form in a person who is described as filled with the gifts of the Spirit. These gifts are given so that the one who receives them may judge, not by appearance or hearsay, but judge the land's poor and afflicted, and protect them from the ruthless, the powerful, and the wicked. The vision grows further, and in baptism and confirmation, we receive these gifts. These gifts are these: wisdom, understanding, counsel, fortitude or courage, knowledge, piety, fear of the Lord, and delight, awe.
You know, as I was preparing to come tonight, I was talking to people and watching the news and just looking at what are the concerns for people in our world today. And after a very short while, what I realized we need to reflect on and pray about during Advent is the gift of hope. It seems that everything in our world is like upside down. We have rage, violence, racism, disregard for the truth, an obsession with money and power, children languishing at the border, etc., etc., etc. And it may seem that there's no hope for a better tomorrow. It may seem like Pandora has been let out of the box and there's no return. However, as Christians, we believe that our God has a different plan. Early in the meditations, in the spiritual exercises of St. Ignatius, we see the Trinity grieving over the mess that humankind is in. They look with heavy hearts on a world that's filled with self-centeredness, a world that has lost its insight that we all are children of God and brothers and sisters to each other. A world that has forgotten the parable that Jesus offers us in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 25, where it says, "And the king will answer them, 'Truly I tell you, just as you did it to one of the least of these, who are members of my family, you did it to me.'" As the scene unfolds, the second person of the Trinity volunteers to come to us, to show us how to live full and meaningful lives. Jesus becomes the perfect human expression of who God is. And the Gospel of John tells us that God is love. When I heard these words, I'm drawn back to a DVD that I saw about the monastic community of Taizé that's located in central France. This community was founded by Brother Roger, and they have developed a wonderful style of music that it's mantra music. It's repeated words that, as somebody said on the DVD, you don't have to think about. It just kind of forms you and just brings you to a beautiful space in God. And it's interesting, they have a thriving monastic community, and thousands of young people come there for a week of retreat every year. It is amazing. I've been there twice, and Taizé, it's like this huge building that had, like the garage doors that come down. Well, they start out having, one room, and then the door goes up, and more people come in, and another door goes up, and more people come in, so that they're really like maybe 500 and maybe 1,000 people there, and then basically all young, and it's just beautiful to watch. Well, anyhow, in this DVD, Brother Roger talks about God is love. He's speaking in French, and even if the film wasn't dubbed, you can see in his face who this God of love is. There's an exquisite beauty and serenity in his face, and you can tell that this man has surrendered his life in trust to the God of love and is now living this love in his everyday life. And Kathy's going to show us just this little, like a 3-foot clip of the DVD, just to illustrate what we were saying.
Assuming Kathy knows how to work.
Oh, I'm sure you'll do fine. Okay, no? Oh, there it is, got it.
For today is the scarcity of faith communities, hence the great importance of those places where they find them.
On sait que
Oh,
la
there it
clé de la prière, c'est entre autres, une des clés, c'est entre autres,
The key to prayer, or at least one of the keys to prayer, is to realize that our prayer to God should express an entirely simple trust. A trust that is very humble.
tout simple, tout humble. Que tout ce qui sort de
Everything that leads us away from this path, that draws us away from this very humble, very simple trust, everything that pulls us away from that is likely to lead nowhere. It will lead us nowhere and will be unhelpful to anybody around us.
risque de le conduire nulle part. nous et ceux qui nous. Il y en a d'autres. Nous et ceux qui entendent.
In my life, I used to pray always to God, I want something and I want this and this. And now I understand, this is not the prayer, but prayer is something to listen from God, no? What God says to us, and listen to Him. And let us try to do what God wants from me.
The songs are really created for praying. They cannot be used for concert. They only make sense if there is this research for God. That's why the person conducting the songs most of the time is not visible in our prayers. Only for the song practices, yes, but not during the prayer. One reason why we sing so many songs have solo verses. So that it's true that there is not only this limitation of a few words we repeat over and over again, but there's also the possibility to listen to other verses from the psalm that continue, that are sung by one person.
I had to change a lot about my voice when I sang at Teze, because all aspect of performance had to disappear. There had to be no show about what you did, and you had to be very humble, else it was completely wrong, it was the wrong sound. And also because the music comes out of prayer, so many musical perfections go out of the window, for example, the rhythm and sometimes the pitch, but that isn't the important thing. And I think everyone who sings here, every musician, still appreciates the music, even if professionally it could be more perfect.
Maybe this one we can push left to go up. Okay.
For the Teze community, the search for new songs, for words that can speak to the heart of young people, is ongoing. Texts written over 1,000 years ago can, in the hands of a gifted composer, breathe fresh life into prayer.
Il est venu une parole d'un penseur du 7e siècle, des années 600.
6 centuries after Christ, there lived a Christian by the name of Isaac. He lived in Nineveh. He's considered to be a saint. He was eager for people to grasp and understand St. John's words, God is love. He expanded on that text of St. John, God is love. And he wrote, God can only give his love. What then does the love of God mean? Considering that God has nothing else to offer, it certainly never means scolding or punishment, never punishing someone. How could that be love? No, love yields an inner trust, peace of heart. The confidence that comes from knowing that we are loved, from knowing that we are forgiven.
L'amour est une.
The love of God is forgiveness given to the full.
La
there were two places, and I thought we had the second one, but we had the first one. But anyhow, you saw Taizé and you got a little sample of their music. And you know, it's interesting, in one of Brother Roger's writings, he said, all God can do is give his love. What God asks above all is to surrender ourselves to him. And what a discovery. God's compassion reawakens an inexhaustible goodness in our heart of hearts. Well, it's interesting, Sister Melanie Savoda wrote a book, Hanging On to Hope, and she says, Jesus was the full expression of God's steadfast love for us. Or, as the little catechism student said so aptly, Jesus is God's show and tell. Don't you love that? In Melanie's book, she continues, Jesus showed us God as one who loves and cares for us. One who we can call Abba, Father. And you know, when you look at the translations, that means daddy. That tenderness, that intimacy with God. And God is one who forgives us our wrongs and failings. God desires peace for us. God challenges us to love one another, even our enemies. And God calls us to forgive each other. Now, the season of Advent comes every year, and it helps us to remember that God has sent us a great gift, Jesus, our Savior. And Advent is a wonderful time for us to prepare for the second coming of Jesus, and also, ultimately, for our own death and passing over. During these days, we can take time to allow God to transform us and ask God to show us how to do our part in helping to transform our world into a place where joy and hope can thrive. What's our pathway? How can we help transform our broken world? As the reading in our opening prayer mentioned, Jesus lived a life filled with the gifts of the Spirit of God. These gifts don't end with Jesus. In our baptism, we were given these same gifts so that we could use them to make our world a better place to live. It's interesting, on the Loyola Press website, there was a lovely, straightforward description of each of the gifts of the Spirit. And I would invite you just to sit back and relax and listen to these descriptions. After I finish reading them, please take about 5 minutes for quiet reflection. There are some questions in your worship aid. Please feel free to use them if they help. And after this, we'll have a few minutes to share with others in small groups. 2 or 3, just move the chairs around a little bit. And just in case, you have any reading difficulties or your eyesight's bad, questions. How am I living these gifts out in my life? Is there one that God has given me in a special way? How do I feel God calling me to be changed so that the kingdom of God will grow and flourish ever more deeply? Which of these gifts would I like to pray for tonight and during the remainder of the Advent season? How is God calling me to be a sign of hope in our broken world? So those are the questions, and I would just invite you to sit back and just let the gifts of the Spirit wash over you and see what God is saying to your heart. Wisdom helps us recognize the importance of others and the importance of keeping God central in our lives. Understanding is the ability to comprehend the meaning of God's message. Knowledge is the ability to think about and explore God's revelation, and also to recognize that there are mysteries of faith beyond us. Counsel is the ability to see the best way to follow God's plan when we have choices that relate to Him. Fortitude is the courage to do what one knows is right. Piety helps us pray to God with true devotion. And fear of the Lord is the feeling of amazement before God, who is all present and whose friendship we do not want to lose. So I would invite you just to take about 10 minutes. If the questions help, feel free to use them, but if they don't, just let the Spirit of God take you where God wills. If you're willing, could you find a partner or two, maybe a group of 2 or 3, and if you'd like to share anything, it'll be about 5 minutes. Is anything that came up in your prayer, anything that about the gifts or questions that you have, or maybe God's given you a gift, and you might just share that with the girl. And maybe that's your special charism, or maybe there's a gift that you really want to pray for. I know there's one I do. So could you just find another partner or a threesome, whatever works for you. And if you don't wish to, that's fine. But if you'd like to do a little sharing, that would be great. Because I think really the wisdom is in the group. It's not just a couple of us who have it. Wisdom is right here. So go for it. And you got 5 minutes. Now, can I interrupt your conversation? I'm sorry to do that because it was very, from what I was hearing when I was walking around, it was really right on target and very fine. Is there anything that you would like to share with each other? Because as I said, the wisdom is in the group. The Spirit of God is within each one of us. Each one of us is gifted. And I would love to hear what you have to say.
Do you mean that we can share what we heard in our groups?
Well, as long as it's, if there's any kind of confidentiality maintained, but, if you heard something that was not of a personal nature, I think it's okay. Is everybody all right with that?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, you got permission.
I learned some really good things, or had reaffirmed for me. One was, I can't remember what they were. One was the idea that instead of looking at the world as broken, that was Suzanne's idea, that we should maybe look for the positive in everything, because the gifts are there, we just have to search for them sometimes because there's so much dark and muddy stuff blocking our vision.
Yes.
And I'm not sure, I can't see your name tag so well, so I don't know your name.
Linda.
Linda. And Linda said, being an example, that's living your life in according to the gifts of the Spirit and being that example, because really, if we're all sort of like ordinary folk,
Mm-hmm.
and we don't have a platform of power like the people we see on TV or whatever, that's the best thing we can do.
That's right. Exactly. I love it. And they said Francis never said it. I like to think he did. Preach the gospel always and use words when necessary.
Yes.
So you're right. We are not able to do a lot of things from a position of power, but we're able to do things from a position of spirit. and really, the witness that you have with your life in everyday circumstances, isn't that the best use of our gifts? Thank you, Joanne. Anyone else like to, yes?
I think going on that, we had tried to decided, I think, that in looking at what our gifts were and visually what is it that God has given us, we kind of came up with the word passion, was the word that I used, but it makes sense what we're passionate about, and just trusting that the passion that we have is directed by God, and it's okay to take chances because He's going to back us, and it's okay to make mistakes because if we don't get it right the first time, as long as we're making the effort and we're really trying to help others and do right, then we'll get it better the next time, and we'll just continue to get better. But looking at ourselves as the vessel, which was the perfect word that I couldn't come up with, and doing what we do and doing what really makes us tick and drives us is going to affect other people in a positive way.
Oh, yes. Yes, how much, how much a simple thing, like not cutting somebody off in traffic, or letting somebody in the grocery store line, doesn't that make a huge difference in our day? If somebody really cuts us off on the freeway, but if somebody kind of waves you in the middle of traffic, and that's where I see God. The presence of love. God is what? Love. God can't be anything else but love. Anything else?
I'll share something, but it's more on a personal note than what Stephen and I were talking, we were talking about, but the one thing that I keep trying to pray for that jumped out at me in this was this fortitude, the courage to do what one knows is right. And I was saying to Stephen that it's easy to share something that's right when you're in a like-minded environment.
Yeah.
But when you're in an environment that might challenge you, then that's the hard part. And for me, the challenge is mostly with my family. And there's one example I want to give where just being, not speaking it, but being an example of my faith is with my youngest daughter. She lives in Texas. She called me last October and she said, she was so angry. She says, Mom, I'm so angry. She says, I've talked with my friends. She had been scammed by somebody. And she says, they told me to burn his house down. I said, well, I don't know if that's quite the thing you should do. But she said, Mom, and this is what really struck me. She said, I needed to talk to somebody with a moral compass.
Yeah.
And I wanted to cry because we didn't have a relationship for a long time. And for her to call me and say, I needed to talk to somebody. So it wasn't so much what I said to her, but who I was to her.
Sure.
So, anyway.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to share a pearl of wisdom?
I'll share. One thing that keeps me from trying, I was telling these guys, is fear. I'm starting to realize that my whole life I've lived according to my fears, which means that I'm not doing things that I feel passionate about. Even trying to set up this program was something that I was afraid to do because it was, what if I don't do well? The fear of rejection, the fear of failure, the fear of ridicule, it's just a fear.
Yeah.
And I'm learning to sort of face my fears and at least try.
Yeah.
And I think that in a way, I feel like it's me not trusting God when I let my fear rule my decisions or my actions or my inactions. So I feel like that's one thing that I'm working on. But yeah, it's just to me the word trust, and I've heard it a few times tonight when you were talking, and I just keep thinking I need to trust God to be God.
That's right.
And to have my back. And if there's something passionate
that I feel passionate about, I need to step forward and at least try.
That's right.
So,
That's right. You know that gospel thing about the gifts, like, somebody got put in charge of 10 cities and they did great, and so God gave them, 10 more. And then there was this one person who had their little gift all wrapped up in a napkin, and they buried it in the earth and then came back to the master with it, and you lazy servant, what have you been doing with my gifts, And it's true, sometimes we don't do things because of fear or whatever, but I think the encouragement is that we have a God who is so loving and kind and merciful, that, if we make mistakes, we're going to be forgiven. And we're going to be treated with mercy and compassion and care, because that's who God is. That's who the Trinity of love is. Always pulling us into that Trinitarian relationship where there's such of an ever-going flow of love. So thank you. Anybody else? Going once? Going twice?
Well, I would like to share that the gift that kind of struck me that I really need to pray for is fortitude, courage to do the right thing. Each year I ask the Lord in place of a New Year's resolution, which I never keep New Year's resolutions. I've been asking the Lord for probably the past 30 years to give me a word or a phrase for that year, and He always does. And this year it was listen closely, listen carefully, and as looking back on this year, it isn't over yet, but the courage to do what when listening, to do what He's telling you to do, because that's the right thing to do.
Yep.
And so this coming year, I think the word He's giving me is serve. So, fortitude to serve when He tells me to serve. And the other thing that struck me, and some people think I'm really weird in this way, but I feel like maybe a gift that He has of the Holy Spirit that He's given me is the awe, fear of the Lord and awe.
Yes.
I'm an altar server here in the parish, and it's the fulfillment of a childhood dream. I always wanted to be an altar server, but when I was a kid, couldn't. And so I've been an altar server for a number of years here. And every time I serve, it's like the first time again. And I experience such an awe and such an amazement when I'm an altar server. It's really hard to describe, but it's so strong. And I feel like that's a gift.
That's wonderful. Thank you.
It's just a gift.
Thank you. Okay. Anything else?
I think understanding what is the meaning of God's message. My Catholic background is from this mission church when it first started. And I don't think I ever talked to a nun until I was an adult. So I feel as though I have a very poor background in knowing what the church's official position is on things. I read the Evangelist to try to learn. And I listen to Father on Sundays with the explanation of the readings, etc. So that's one thing I keep on working at. Just the understanding.
Isn't that wonderful?
Ongoing.
That's right. And that's going to be an ongoing event in all of our lives. Right till they, click the coffin. It's because like the image to me is like we're like trees, and each year there's an annual ring, and the trees get bigger and bigger and bigger. I suppose there's some cutoff point for trees, but I see our relationship with God as an infinite kind of thing where we just keep on growing and growing and growing in our understanding, and maybe things that we didn't understand or we didn't get right the first time, God is showing us. Like when I was brought up, kind of the hellfire and brimstone God was the God people understood. And it took me like about 20 or 30 years before God kind of really broke through and said, and it's funny, I had prayed for years, God, take away the idols in my life, tell me who you really are. And then when I see faces like Brother Roger, who really have captured God is love, then that speaks to my heart. Anything else? I'm just conscious of time, and I know it's cold and windy and black out, and you probably want to get home. But we'll just kind of, I'll just go through some of the closing things here. You know, in Sister Melody's book, Hanging On to Hope, she described two of our contemporaries who lived out the gift of hope and embodied the gifts of the Spirit. And one of the people she highlighted was Mr. Rogers. And Mr. Rogers, who was the host of the PBS show, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. And it's interesting, just last week, a documentary came out, A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, and the trailers were really wonderful. I can't wait to see it. But, you know, he was born in 1928 in Pittsburgh, and he earned a degree in music, composition, and then he married Sarah Joanne Bird, and he was ordained a Presbyterian minister in 1963. Now, he didn't feel called to preaching, but he knew that TV had something special, and he didn't like the programming that children were being exposed to. So, didn't he create his own? And one of the things that he said that really struck me is, knowing we can be loved exactly as we are gives us the best opportunity for growing into the healthiest of people. Doesn't that really ring true? You know, I taught school for years, and you know, if you told kids they were bad and rotten, they lived up to your expectation. But if you treated them with dignity and respect and told them that they were intelligent human beings and that they certainly could learn this, they did. So I think that, you know, just knowing we're loved. And, you know, he used his creativity with his musical skill, his wisdom, and just his downright goodness, where he emphasized love, acceptance, understanding, and just a practical wisdom. And in his 50 years of programming, he confronted difficult feelings like anger and fear. He talked about divorce and war and death, but he did it in a non-threatening way through songs that he wrote, and then guests that appeared on his program, and his puppets. So I just felt like, wow, Mr. Rogers to me does, just as a contemporary person, embodies hope. He wanted to make sure that the new generation of children were cared for and encouraged to love and care for themselves. And he says one of the greatest dignities of humankind is that each successive generation is invested in the welfare of each new generation. I thought, whoa, what wisdom. And then he said, anyone who does anything to help a child is a hero to me. You know, in his desire to make life a better place, he shows us how to put into action the gift of the Spirit. And Brother Roger from Taizé said, there are people who, by the gift of themselves, bear witness to the fact that human beings are not doomed to hopelessness. Are we among them? However destitute we may be, we are not called to communicate a mystery of hope around us by the way we live our lives. Yes, right on. And in closing, I'd like to share a poem prayer by Pierre Teilhard de Chardin. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but if you've ever been down to the CIA down in, New Paltz, the Culinary Institute of America, he is buried in the backyard because that was originally a Jesuit, I think it might have been like, I don't know if it was their novitiate or scholasticate or whatever, but we went to see his grave. And he was a French Jesuit, and he was a priest, a theologian, and a philosopher. And he lived from 1881 to 1955, and he was a man far ahead of his time. He worked to integrate science, spirituality, and theology. he also had a vision that matter and spirit were united. So basically, as I read this poem, it's in your handout, but if you would just like to close your eyes and pretend that Pierre is speaking to you. Above all, trust in the slow work of God. We are quite naturally impatient in everything, to reach the end without delay. We should like to skip the intermediate stages. We are impatient of being on the way to something unknown, something new. And yet it is the law of all progress that it is made by passing through some stages of instability, and that it may take a very long time. And so I think it is with you. Your ideas mature gradually. Let them grow. Let them shape themselves without undue haste. Don't try to force them on as though you could be today what time, that is to say, grace and circumstances acting on your goodwill, will make of you tomorrow. Only God could say what the new spirit gradually forming in you will be. Give our Lord the benefit of believing that his hand is leading you, and accept the anxiety of feeling yourself in suspense and incomplete. I would just like to thank you for coming tonight. And a part of our closing prayer, could you get your little prayer cards out on hope? And you know how you sometimes in the middle of the night you'll wake up and say, oh! It all of a sudden occurred to me one night when I was sleeping that this prayer needed to be prayed antiphonally, because I think we need to hear each other's voices and not just our own. And so I would invite this side to do the first petition and this side to do the second, and we'll just keep alternating back and forth until we finish. Hope looks
For the good in people, instead of harping on the worst. Hope opens doors where despair closes them. Hope discovers what can be done, instead of grumbling about what cannot. Hope draws its power from the deep trust in God and the basic goodness of human nature. Hope lights a candle instead of cursing the darkness. Hope regards problems, small or large, as opportunities. Hope cherishes no illusions, nor does it yield to cynicism. Hope sets big goals and is not frustrated by repeated difficulties or setbacks. Hope pushes ahead when it would be easy to quit. Hope looks up with modest gains, realizing that the longest journey starts with one step. Hope accepts misunderstandings as the price for serving the greater good of others. Hope is a good loser because it has the divine assurance of final victory.
And if you could find your little prayer sheet, let's pray the final closing prayer together. God of mystery, during this blessed season, help us to be people of hope in the midst of the darkness that we see about us. Help us to trust that you are with us, quietly working on the transformation of our world. Keep us from discouragement, and let our eyes be focused on you, our source of life and love. We offer this prayer in the name of Jesus, by the power of the Spirit. Amen. And as I said, thank you for coming, and thank you for sharing. It was so rich. we could have really gone on for another 15 or 20 minutes, but I do want you to get home, and I do want to thank you. And as a closing ritual, can we offer each other the sign of peace? And then we're done.